prepare yourself for an unexpected twist. Before diving into this story of betrayal and triumph, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more breathtaking tales. Are you ready for the truth? The perfect life shatters in 3 words. The clinking of champagne flutes often announces a celebration, but at the annual gala of the Moreno Family Foundation, it became the sound of a life shattering. Before the high society of Manhattan, the billionaire patriarch, a man who seemingly had everything, raised his glass. But the woman he toasted was not his wife of 5 years, the mother of his child who had helped build his empire by his side. It was a woman half his age, a stranger to them all. What followed was not just a scandal, but a war. A war for a name, a fortune, and a family. And the next day, the battle lines would be drawn in the most shocking way imaginable. Lucia Norton felt the crystal goblet slip from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor, a perfect and violent metaphor for her heart. She was 7 months pregnant, expecting her son, the heir to the Moreno fortune, a fortune her own family had helped build. But her husband, Matthew Moreno, had found a new partner, a wealthier heiress. He didn't just want a divorce, he wanted to erase her and their child. Cast out onto the streets and penniless, she found an ally in the only man Matthew feared more, his ruthless rival, Gabriel Vance. This is not just a story of betrayal. It is the story of how a mother's love, forged in the fire of ruin, and an enemy's promise born of a forgotten debt, built a fortress around a child that the city's most powerful man would try to tear down, and fail. The crystal chandeliers of the Metamorphosis Charity Gala dripped light like liquid diamonds, casting a golden sheen over the city's elite. Lucia Norton, a hand resting protectively over the soft curve of her belly, watched her husband, Matthew Moreno, move through the ballroom. He moved with the grace of a predator. His smile was a carefully calibrated weapon that disarmed competitors and charmed investors. He was beautiful, incredibly beautiful, and for the past 5 years he had been hers. Her life a masterpiece of perfection. The sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, the weekends in the Riviera Maya, the closets full of bespoke suits and couture gowns. It was all part of the Moreno brand, a brand built on Matthew's keen intelligence and the sturdy foundation of Lucia's old money family, the Nortons. Her father had seen Matthew's ambition as a perfect match for the family legacy. He had mentored the boy from the wrong neighborhood. He had given him the starting capital. He had consolidated and handed over his most precious treasure. "Your daughter, your glowing treasure," said a voice beside her. It was Beatrice Stone, a woman whose face was as tight as her social circle. Lucia offered a polite smile. "It's the glow of pregnancy, Beatrice, or so they tell me." "Well, it suits you better than most. Matthew must be thrilled. A son to continue the name." "He is," Lucia said, her gaze finding him again across the ballroom. He was deep in a seemingly friendly conversation with the infamous telecom magnate, Mr. Conrad Cast. By Cast's side was his daughter, Sophia Cast, a woman who looked like she was sculpted from ice and diamonds. She laughed at something Matthew said, her head tilted, a scarlet mouth against pale skin, a pang of unease, a feeling that had become far too familiar lately, squeezed Lucia's chest. It was the late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls he ended abruptly when she entered the room, the faint scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his suit jacket. He always had a plausible explanation. A deal was closing. A crisis was being averted. You know how it is, Lucia. To stay on top, you can never rest. And she, wanting to be the supportive wife, the perfect partner, had accepted it. She had pushed her doubts into the dark corners of her mind, focusing instead on the baby's room being painted in soft blues and creams, on the small life fluttering within her. Her eyes scanned the room and settled on a figure standing alone near the French doors leading to the terrace. Gabriel Vance, the only man in New York City who could make Matthew flinch. Vance was new money, a phantom who had emerged from the shadows of Silicon Valley 5 years ago and had been systematically dismantling his competitors ever since. His rivalry with Matthew was legendary on Wall Street. Where Matthew was polished charm, Gabriel was brutal efficiency. He didn't shake hands. He conquered. He looked different than the photos in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Taller, darker. An intensity radiated from him that seemed to suck the air from his immediate surroundings. He wasn't smiling or socializing. He was simply observing. His gaze was an analytical searchlight, scanning everything. For one terrifying second, his eyes met hers across the crowded room. There was no warmth in them, just a flash of something she couldn't decipher. Recognition? Perhaps? Or was it pity? She shivered and looked away, feeling as though he had seen through her carefully constructed happiness to the anxious heart beating beneath. Matthew finally broke free from the casts and returned to her side, his hand landing on her lower back. "Enjoying the party, my love. It's a lovely event," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "You and Sophia Cast seem to have a lot to talk about." A flash of annoyance crossed his face before being replaced by his signature smile. "Conrad is a necessary evil, and Sophia is his gatekeeper. It's just business, Lucia. Always business." He leaned in and kissed her cheek, but his eyes were already scanning the crowd for his next target. The kiss felt cold, a performative gesture for the audience they were always playing to. Later that night, as their luxury car cut through the gleaming streets of Manhattan, the silence between them was heavy. Lucia wanted to ask about the late nights, about the faint smell of gardenias on his collar, but the words wouldn't form. To ask was to be prepared for an answer she wasn't sure she could survive. Back in their penthouse, the silence stretched, amplified by the cavernous rooms and the panoramic view of the city that never sleeps. Matthew loosened his tie, his back to her, as he gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows. "The Cast deal is going to be massive, Lucia," he said, his voice distant. "It's the final piece. It will make us untouchable. Us." The word sounded foreign, a relic from a time when she had believed it meant the two of them. Now it felt like it meant him and his ambition. "That's wonderful, Nate," she responded softly. He didn't turn around. "I need you to understand the stakes, the level of commitment that's going to be required." "I understand," she whispered, a hand on her belly. "We both understand." For a long moment he said nothing. The only sound was the hum of the city below. When he finally turned, his face was a mask she didn't recognize. The charming husband was gone, replaced by the ruthless CEO. There was no love in his eyes, only a final, chilling calculation. The gilded cage she had called home was about to become her tomb. The ultimatum the following week passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Matthew was more distant than ever, a ghost in their opulent home. He moved with a quiet, deliberate purpose that made Lucia nervous. He was orchestrating something, she knew, but she clung to the hope that it was just the Cast deal, the all-consuming business venture he claimed was for them. The frail illusion shattered one Tuesday afternoon, the sky the color of a dull bruise threatening rain. Lucia was in the baby's room, carefully folding a small cashmere sweater when Matthew walked in. He made no comment about the room, about the hand-painted mural of a serene forest she had commissioned, or the small mountain of baby gifts from their ostentatious baby shower. He simply stood in the doorway, His tailored suit looked absurdly out of place amidst the soft innocence of the room. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice he used in board meetings right before dismantling a failing department. A cold dread washed over her. "Okay," she said, pausing her hand over the sweater. "Is something wrong with the deal?" "The deal is fine. The deal is perfect." He walked further into the room, his expensive leather shoes silent on the plush rug. He stopped beside the crib, running a hand over the smooth, polished wood. All of this, is a complication." "A complication?" Lucia's voice was a weak whisper. "Nate, this is our son's room. Our baby." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were as gray and cold as the storm gathering outside. "I'm leaving you, Lucia." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds disconnected from meaning. She stared at him, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the cruel joke to end. But his expression remained unchanged, a mask of grim finality. "What?" "I'm leaving you," he repeated, cutting each word with brutal precision. "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact yours." Lucia felt the strength drain from her legs, and she grabbed the changing table for support. The room began to spin. Who is it for?" "Sophia Cast?" The name tasted like venom on her tongue. He had the decency to look away, his eyes fixed on the cityscape beyond the window. "Sophia and I are getting married. Her father has appointed me a full partner in Cast Telecom. This merger is not just a business deal, Lucia. It's a dynasty." The brazen audacity, the cold, transactional nature of his betrayal stole her breath. He was trading her in, trading in his family for a better business deal. "A dynasty? What about our family? What about your son?" Her voice cracked. Tears finally blurred her vision. "The baby complicates things," he said, turning back to her. His face was set, resolute. "Sophia's family is particular. A child from a previous marriage, especially one born so close to our own union, would be an embarrassment. A loose end." "A loose end?" she shrieked, the sound raw and hurting. "He is your son. He is part of you." "That's why this needs to be handled cleanly," Matthew continued, lowering his voice to a low, conspiratorial tone, as if discussing a hostile takeover, not the fate of his child. "I have a proposal. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous settlement, more than enough for you to live comfortably, to go somewhere new, to start over. I don't want your money, Matthew. I want my husband. I want a father for my son." "You're not listening," he hissed, taking a step closer. The mask of civility was gone, revealing the ugliness beneath. "The deal is contingent on one thing. You terminate the pregnancy." The air rushed out of her lungs in a single, choked gasp. The room tilted violently. For a moment she thought she might faint. He was asking her to kill their child, to erase the last living piece of the love she thought they had shared. All for the sake of his ambition. "Get out," she whispered. The words trembled with a rage so deep she felt it might shatter her bones. "Lucia, be reasonable. A child will only tie you to a past that's over. This is a clean slate for both of us. You can be free." "Get out!" she screamed, grabbing a porcelain lamp from the side table and hurling it at him. It shattered against the wall just behind his head. The sound of splintering ceramic echoing the destruction in the room, and in her heart. He didn't even flinch. He simply smoothed his tie. His expression hardened into one of utter contempt. "I see you're going to be difficult. I had hoped to handle this with dignity." "Dignity? You walk into our baby's room and ask me to murder him for your career and talk about dignity." Her body shook with sobs, a storm of grief and fury exploding inside her. "Fine," he said, his voice like ice. "Have it your way, but don't think for a second you'll get anything from me. Our prenup is ironclad, something your own father insisted upon. Every asset, Every consolidated Moreno stock option is in my name. The company was failing when we married. I'm the one who made it what it is. You'll leave this marriage with what you brought into it, the Norton name, and not much else. He had used her family's money and connections to build his empire, and now he was casting her aside with nothing. My father trusted you, she choked out. Your father is dead, Matthew said with chilling finality. He made a bad investment. I'm correcting it now. He turned and walked out of the baby's room, leaving her alone amidst the wreckage of her future. She sank to the floor, her hands wrapped around her belly, the small, innocent life inside her, the only real thing left in a world that had just been stripped of all its truth and beauty. The rain finally broke outside, lashing against the windows as Lucia Norton sat on the floor of a room built for a son who would now never know his father. And she wept. What do you think of Matthew's behavior? Do you believe Lucia will be able to survive this alone? Share your thoughts in the comments. The unexpected ally. The days that followed were a masterclass in systematic cruelty. Matthew, true to his word, moved with the swift, impersonal efficiency of a corporate raider dismantling a company. The first notification was an email from the building management politely informing her that the corporate lease on the penthouse was being terminated, and she had 30 days to vacate the premises. Joint bank accounts were frozen, then emptied. Credit cards were rejected. The black luxury car and its driver vanished. Her world, once a boundless horizon of privilege, shrank to the size of a few cardboard boxes. The society friends who had toasted her at her baby shower now averted their gazes in the few places she still frequented. Their whispers followed her like a cold wind. She was no longer Lucia Norton Moreno. The elegant wife of a titan was a scandal, a cautionary tale, a woman scorned, and what was worse, a woman who had been left penniless. In their world, poverty was the only unforgivable sin. She packed the baby's room herself, each tiny outfit and soft blanket, a fresh dagger in her heart. She was a ghost, haunting the shell of her own life, surrounded by objects that no longer belonged to her. The city she had once considered her kingdom now felt alien and hostile. Every skyscraper seemed to mock her, a monument to the power and wealth that had been stolen from her. Her lawyer, a kind but weary man named Mr. Robles, who had served her family for 40 years, laid out the harsh reality. The prenup is a fortress, Lucia. Your father helped draft it to protect the family's assets should the marriage fail. The irony is that Matthew has twisted it. He successfully argued that because he absorbed Norton Industries into Moreno Consolidated, and then grew the company exponentially, all assets are now considered his creation. Your father's original investment is a pittance compared to the company's current valuation. So I get nothing, she asked. Her voice hollow. He is legally required to provide child support once the baby is born, Mr. Robles said, a small mercy in a sea of devastation. But Matthew is already laying the groundwork to fight for full custody, claiming you are emotionally unstable and financially incapable of caring for a child. The cruelty was breathtaking. He wouldn't help her, but he would use her desperation against her to steal her son. With the small amount of money she had in a personal account from before the marriage, she rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a dismal part of Brooklyn, a world away from the gleaming spires of Manhattan. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and street food. Sirens at night replaced the soft hum of the penthouse climate control. It was a humiliating and terrifying freefall. She sold her jewelry piece by piece. The diamond earrings Matthew had given her for their first anniversary paid 3 months' rent. Her grandmother's pearl necklace covered her initial doctor visits for the baby. Every transaction felt like she was selling a piece of her past, of herself. One rainy afternoon, heavily pregnant and emotionally exhausted, She stood at a busy grocery store with her items on the conveyor belt: a carton of milk, a loaf of bread, some eggs, prenatal vitamins. The total came to $27. She swiped her debit card. Rejected. A heat of shame crawled up her neck. She tried again. Rejected. The account was empty. She had miscalculated. "Ma'am," the cashier asked, his voice with an edge of impatience. People in line behind her began to murmur. Lucia's eyes filled with tears. She fumbled in her purse. Her hands shook, searching for a few loose bills that she knew weren't there. She was forced to leave the groceries on the counter, mumbling an apology as she fled the store. The pitying and judgmental glances of strangers burning into her back. She walked for blocks in the rain, not caring that she was soaked to the bone. The feeling of total, complete humiliation. A cold, hard knot in her stomach. She was about to bring a child into this world, and she couldn't even afford milk. That night, she sat in the darkness in her small, unfamiliar apartment. The sounds of the city roared, an oppressive drone. The eviction notice from the penthouse had arrived that morning, a cold, official document marking the definitive end of her old life. She was utterly alone, stripped of her identity, her security, and her dignity. She had hit rock bottom. The fall was complete. She held her belly. The baby's soft kicks a reminder of the one thing Matthew couldn't take away. He was all she had left. As despair threatened to swallow her whole, she made a silent promise to the son she hadn't met yet. "I won't let him break us. I will find a way." But as she stared out the window into the rain, for the first time in her life, she had no idea how. 3 weeks before her due date, the final eviction notice arrived. It was a stark warning, red letters taped to her apartment door, a public declaration of her failure. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She had nowhere to go. Her remaining funds were nearly depleted, and the prospect of finding a new apartment in her condition, with no income and no references, was impossible. She spent the morning on the phone calling shelters, her voice thick with shame. They were all full. As she sat on her worn sofa, the terrifying reality of giving birth on the streets looming over her, there was a dull knock at the door. Her heart leaped, assuming it was the landlord or a city marshal. She ignored it, hoping they would leave. The knock came again, harder this time, more insistent. With a deep sigh, she hauled herself up and shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole. A man, impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, stood in the gloomy hallway. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then, her blood ran cold. It was Gabriel Vance. Her mind raced. What was he doing here? How had he found her? Was this some new, cruel game of Matthew's, sending his arch-rival to gloat in her ruin? Her protective instincts flared, and she slid the latch, opening the door only a few inches. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice louder than she felt. Gabriel Vance's eyes, the same intense, analytical eyes she remembered from the gala, took in her appearance. Her worn maternity dress, the fear in her expression, the shabby apartment visible behind her. He didn't mock her. He didn't smile. His face was a stoic mask. "Mrs. Moreno," he said, his voice a low baritone. "My name is Gabriel Vance. May I speak with you?" "It's Norton," she corrected him sharply. "And I have nothing to say to you. You're my husband's friend." "Your ex-husband," he clarified. A subtle but significant distinction. "And Matthew Moreno and I are not, nor have we ever been, friends. Quite the opposite." He paused. "I'm here because of your father, Robert Norton." The mention of her father, dead 3 years, was a shock that momentarily disarmed her. "My father? He was my mentor," Gabriel said simply. "When I was 19 and had nothing but a half-baked business plan for a software company, He saw something in me. He gave me a small seed investment, not from his company, but from his personal pocket. He made me promise never to mention it, to build my own name. That investment was the foundation of everything I have today. I owe him a debt I can never truly repay." Lucia stared at him wordlessly. Her father had a gift for finding and nurturing young talent, but he had never mentioned Gabriel Vance. This man, this corporate titan feared by all, was a product of her father's quiet generosity. "I've been following what Matthew has done to you," Gabriel continued, his gaze unwavering. "What he is doing is not just immoral. It is a desecration of your father's legacy. Robert Norton built his company on integrity. Matthew is destroying it with greed, and he is trying to destroy his son." "Why are you here?" she asked again, her voice softer this time. "I'm here to offer you a proposal," he said. "I want to help you, not out of pity, but out of a sense of honor to the man who helped me. I know you face eviction. I know your funds are gone. I know Matthew plans to sue you for custody the moment the child is born." Lucia leaned against the doorframe, the weight of her pregnancy suddenly immense. "What kind of proposal?" "I own an isolated property outside the city, Finca Vance, fully equipped and secure. You can live there as long as you need. You will have the best medical attention, financial stability, everything you and your child require. You will want for nothing." The offer was so astounding, so far outside the realm of possibility, that it sounded like a trap. "And what do you want in return?" she asked, her suspicion returning. "No one does something like this for free." Gabriel's expression remained unreadable. Matthew's greatest weakness has always been his pride. He sees his son not as a human being, but as an asset, a continuation of his dynasty. He abandoned his child for a business deal, but the moment that child is born, his ego will demand that he possess him. He will try to take him from you. He took a step closer, his presence filling the narrow doorway. "My proposal is this. I will give you all the resources you need to protect your son. In exchange, you allow me to help raise him. Let me provide the security and the future that his father has stolen. The grandson of Robert Norton will not be raised by a man like that. I will not allow it." "You want to raise my son?" she stammered, horrified and confused. "I want to protect him," Gabriel corrected. "And in doing so, I want to ensure that Matthew Moreno can never claim the legacy of the man he betrayed." It was a strange, almost futile pact. A deal born of honor, vengeance, and the ghost of a man they had both admired. Lucia looked at this powerful, enigmatic man and saw not a threat, but a potential lifeline. He was offering her and her unborn child sanctuary. The alternative was the street. She thought of the cold humiliation at the grocery store, the damning red letters of the eviction notice, and Matthew's chilling words in the baby's room. She had promised her son she would find a way. Perhaps this was it. A dangerous, unorthodox, and desperate way. "There will be conditions," she said, testing him, her mind slowly beginning to work again. "My son will have my last name, Norton, and I will be his mother, his sole parent. You are a guardian, a benefactor, nothing more." Gabriel nodded, accepting her terms without hesitation. "Of course, he is your son. I merely offer my protection." Lucia took a deep, shuddering breath. She was making a deal with her husband's greatest enemy, entrusting her future and her child's future to a man she barely knew. It was a leap of faith into a dark abyss, but it was better than the certain ruin that awaited her. "All right, Mr. Vance," she said, meeting his intense gaze. "We have a deal. What do you think of Lucia's decision? Do you think she can trust Gabriel Vance? Leave your comments and tell us if you think this is the start of a new love story." The price of arrogance, the property named Finca Vance was less a house and more a kingdom carved into the lush hills of upstate New York. A long, winding driveway flanked by ancient oaks led to a majestic gray stone mansion overlooking a private lake. It was a fortress of tranquility and wealth, a world away from the grime and desperation of her Brooklyn apartment. Gabriel was true to his word. He was a discreet and respectful presence. He settled her into a beautiful suite of rooms overlooking the gardens, arranged for a team of the best prenatal doctors to make house calls, and ensured she had everything she could possibly need. His staff was professional and kind, led by a warm but no-nonsense housekeeper named Mrs. Gomez. For the first time in months, Lucia could breathe. She was safe. Gabriel primarily worked from a large, book-lined study on the ground floor, and their interactions were initially formal. Occasionally they shared a quiet dinner, during which he would tell her stories about her father's early days, tales of his business acumen, his surprising humor, and his unwavering faith in people. Through Gabriel, Lucia felt a connection to the father she missed so much, and she began to see the man behind the ruthless corporate reputation. She saw a man of deep loyalty, driven by a personal code of honor. As her due date approached, a strange, quiet camaraderie grew between them. He would find her in the library and silently hand her a cup of decaf tea. She would leave the business section of the newspaper on his desk, open to an article she thought he would find interesting. They rarely spoke of Matthew, but his presence remained like a poison in the air, the unspoken reason for their strange alliance. The night she went into labor, a fierce thunderstorm raged outside, mirroring the beautiful chaos of birth. It was Gabriel who found her breathing through a contraction in the hallway. His composure was absolute. He helped her into the waiting car and spoke to her in a calm, firm voice during the drive to the private hospital wing he had reserved. He never left the waiting room. Matthias Norton was born just as the sun began to rise. The storm had passed. He was small and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's intense blue eyes. When the nurse brought him to Lucia, her heart swelled with a love so fierce and all-encompassing that it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal of the past year. He was hers. He was her reason for everything. Later that day, she allowed Gabriel to see him. He stood in the doorway of the hospital room, looking hesitant for the first time since they met. He seemed out of place, a titan of industry, humbled by the sight of a small, sleeping baby. "Come in, Gabriel," she said softly. He approached the bassinet slowly, his gaze fixed on the baby. He looked at Matthias. His stern features softened into an expression of wonder and something more, something akin to reverence. "He looks like you," Gabriel said, his voice quiet. "He has my eyes," Lucia agreed, "but that little frown is all his." Gabriel extended a single finger and gently stroked the baby's cheek. Matthias stirred, but did not wake. In that small, silent gesture, Lucia saw the truth of his promise. This wasn't just a vendetta against Matthew or a debt to her father. This powerful, solitary man was captivated. Meanwhile, in New York City, Matthew Moreno and Sophia Cast were on the cover of Vogue, showcasing their wedding, hailed as the social event of the year. The photos showed them in their minimalist, art-filled penthouse, smiling for the cameras, the perfect power couple. The article mentioned their plans for the future, for the Moreno Cast dynasty. No mention was made of a child. Matthew learned of the birth through a private investigator he had hired to trail Lucia. The news landed with a thud in his chest. A son. He had a son. He looked at the photos the private investigator had taken from a distance. Lucia leaving the hospital, looking tired but radiant. And Gabriel Vance, his sworn enemy, carrying the baby's car seat with an air of proprietorship. A black, possessive rage filled him. Vance was meddling in his affairs, touching what was his. "What is it, darling?" Sophia asked, walking into his study, dripping in jewels from a party they were about to attend. "Nothing," Matthew snapped, closing his laptop. "Just a business annoyance." But it wasn't just an annoyance. It was a seed of obsession. The son he had ordered to be erased was now alive, well, and under the protection of his greatest rival. Matthias Norton's existence was a loose end in the perfect tapestry of his new life, and Matthew Moreno did not tolerate loose ends. For now, he would ignore him, consolidate his power, and revel in his victory. But he knew with a certainty that chilled him that one day he would come to claim his asset. The claws of obsession. The next 6 years passed in an idyllic quiet that felt both precious and precarious. Finca Vance became a sanctuary, a world unto itself, where Matthias Norton could grow up shielded from the identity of his biological father. For Matthias, home was the sprawling estate with its secret gardens and shimmering lake. Family was his mother, Lucia, and the tall, quiet man he called Papa, Gabriel, who in every way that mattered became his father. Gabriel's transformation was subtle, but profound. The cold, calculating businessman was still there, running his global empire from his study with ruthless efficiency. But the moment he stepped out of that room, he was Matthias's father in every sense that mattered. He taught the boy to skip stones on the lake, their shared laughter echoing in the cool autumn air. He sat on a tiny chair at a small table for imaginary tea parties, his large figure comically out of place, a serious expression on his face as he asked about the health of Matthias's teddy bear, Sir Reginald. He read him bedtime stories, his deep baritone giving voice to dragons and knights, his finger tracing the words for the little boy snuggled next to him. He never overstepped, always deferred to Lucia on major parenting decisions, but his devotion was absolute. He was the steady, unwavering rock against which their small family was built. Lucia also flourished. With Gabriel's encouragement and financial backing, she returned to her first love, landscape architecture. She started a small boutique firm working out of a design studio Gabriel had built for her in one of the estate's old carriage houses. Her talent, once a mere hobby, became a successful business. She reclaimed her independence and her identity, not as the discarded wife of Matthew Moreno, but as Lucia Norton, a respected designer and a loving mother. The quiet bond between her and Gabriel deepened into a profound, trusting friendship, a partnership in the truest sense of the word. The question of romance never arose. Their shared purpose, Matthias, was too sacred to complicate. In New York City, Matthew Moreno's life was a mirror image of theirs, outwardly perfect, inwardly hollow. The merger with Cass Telecom had made him spectacularly wealthy and powerful, a king in the concrete jungle. He and Sophia were regular fixtures on the social scene, their lives a glossy representation of marital bliss. But behind the closed doors of their minimalist penthouse, the silence was deafening. Their marriage was a business contract, and it had one glaring, unfulfilled clause, an heir. After years of trying, of invasive treatments and silent disappointment, their doctors delivered the final verdict. Sophia was unable to conceive. The news shattered the fragile truce of their relationship, exposing the transactional core. Mr. Conrad Cast began looking at his son-in-law with unconcealed disappointment. A dynasty required a successor. It was then that Matthew's thoughts began to drift, to fixate on the son he had abandoned. The loose end was now a 6-year-old boy. His obsession began small. He paid his private investigator an exorbitant amount of money for updates. First came the reports, then the photographs. He would stare at them for hours in the pre-dawn light, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. There was Matthias, on a pony, Gabrielle guiding him, a rare, genuine smile on the man's face. There was Matthias on a swing set, his mother pushing him, his face lit with joy. There was Matthias, in a school play, dressed as a tree, with Gabrielle and Lucia sitting in the front row, looking, in every sense, like a proud, normal family. And in every photo, he saw a ghost of himself. The shape of the boy's jaw, the way his dark hair fell over his forehead. This was his son, his blood, his legacy. And Gabriel Vance was raising him. The thought was a vile poison, twisting his pride into a knot of jealous fury. Vance had not only beaten him in business, he had stolen his son, his very immortality. Matthew began to investigate, using his vast resources to unearth every detail of their lives. He learned Matthias's favorite color, blue, his favorite food, macaroni and cheese, and that he wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. He knew the name of Matthias's teacher and his best friend. He became a digital phantom, a voyeur spying on the happy life he had thrown away. The breaking point came on his own birthday. Sophia threw him a lavish party, the room filled with people who admired his wealth but knew nothing of the man. As they toasted his success, he saw a new photo on his secure phone. It was of Matthias, a gap-toothed grin on his face, holding a homemade birthday card. The private investigator's caption read, "Subject celebrating Gabriel Vance's birthday. His son was calling his enemy Papa." The illusion of his perfect life crumbled into dust. The wealth, the power, the beautiful wife, it was all meaningless. He no longer wanted a dynasty. He wanted his son. The boy was no longer a complication to be erased or an asset to be possessed. In Matthew's twisted mind, Matthias had become the prize in the final competition against Gabriel Vance, and Matthew Moreno never, ever lost. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of the state's most ruthless family lawyer. "My name is Matthew Moreno," he said, his voice cold and clear. "I want to gain full custody of my son. What do you think of Matthew's obsession? Do you believe he has any chance of winning? Tell us your opinion in the comments." The battle for the soul. The legal documents arrived one crisp October morning, delivered by a stone-faced messenger. The sheer thickness of the file was an act of intimidation in itself. Lucia's hands trembled as she read the petition. Matthew Moreno versus Lucia Norton for full legal and physical custody of Matthias Norton. The petition was a work of fiction, a masterpiece of character assassination. It painted her as an unstable, gold-digging opportunist who had fallen into the clutches of Gabriel Vance, a man of dubious character who had insidiously alienated the child from his natural father. It portrayed Matthew as the grieving father who, after a period of emotional turmoil in the wake of his bitter divorce, was now financially and emotionally prepared to provide his son with the stable, loving home he deserved. It was filled with lies, half-truths, and cruel inversions of reality. Gabriel read it over her shoulder. His face hardened to granite. "He's not just coming for Matthias," he said, his voice a low growl. "He's coming for everything. He wants to destroy us." The battle that ensued was brutal and public. Matthew used the media as his personal weapon, leaking sanitized versions of his court documents to gossip columnists. Headlines screamed in the tabloids, "Titan fights to reclaim son from rival billionaire." They were portrayed as the villains in his carefully crafted narrative. Matthew's lawyers were relentless. They subpoenaed Lucia's financial records, her therapy notes from after the divorce, her business contracts. They interrogated Mrs. Gomez and other staff members, trying to twist their loyalty into evidence of a conspiracy. They argued that Finca Vance was not a home, but a gilded prison, and that Gabriel's presence was detrimental to the child's development. The day Lucia had to give her deposition was one of the worst of her life. For 6 hours, Matthew's lead counsel, a shark in a $1,000 suit named Beatrice Stone, dissected her life, her choices, her very worth as a mother. "Ms. Norton," Stone began, her voice dripping with condescension, "isn't it true that you were penniless and facing eviction when you accepted Mr. Vance's generous offer?" "I was in a difficult situation because my ex-husband illegally cut off my access to all marital assets," Lucia countered, her voice firm despite the furious pounding of her heart. "Then you entered into a financial agreement with your ex-husband's known business enemy, an agreement that provided you with a life of luxury in exchange for what exactly? Your son's affection? Did you make an alliance to protect your child, or did you sell him?" The cruelty of the question hit her with physical force, but she met the lawyer's gaze. "My son is not a commodity. That is a concept you should discuss with your client." Gabriel, meanwhile, was fighting a war on a different front. He used his own formidable resources not to attack, but to defend. His legal team was a silent army of the best minds in the country. They built a fortress of evidence documenting Matthias's happy, stable, and richly fulfilling life. They had photos, videos, school reports, and testimonies from teachers, doctors, and friends, all painting a picture of a loved and thriving child. The climax came in the quiet, sterile, wood-paneled room of a closed-door custody hearing. Matthew was there, looking powerful and confident in a dark suit. Sophia, a silent, anxious statue, was by his side. He took the stand and offered a flawless performance, speaking of his deep regret and his profound, enduring love for the son he had never met. Then it was Gabriel's turn to be cross-examined. Beatrice Stone circled him like a predator. "Mr. Vance, you are not this child's father. You have no biological claim, no legal right. What exactly are you to Matthias Norton?" Gabriel looked not at the lawyer, but at the judge. His voice when he spoke was calm and clear, devoid of the anger they were trying to elicit. "I am the man who holds his hand when he's scared of the dark. I am the one who cheers the loudest at his soccer games. I am the one who explains why the sky is blue and who listens to his jokes, even when I know the punchline." He paused. "You are correct. I have no biological claim. My claim is written in 6 years of bedtime stories, bandaged knees, and unconditional love. I am his father in every way that matters. I am his papa." The final blow, however, came from an unexpected source. Gabriel's lawyers called Sophia Cast Moreno to the stand. Matthew's team protested furiously, but the judge allowed it. Sophia was pale, her composure fragile. Gabriel's lawyer, a quiet, methodical man, approached her gently. "Mrs. Moreno, your husband states his desire to provide a stable, 2-parent home for his son in his petition. Do you share this desire?" Sophia hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward Matthew, who shot her a look of pure menace. She took a shaky breath. "Yes," she whispered. "And do you believe he can provide that stability, given the circumstances of your marriage?" "Yes." The lawyer paused. Then he placed a file on the witness stand. "Then, can you explain to the court the documents I have before me, those signed by you and your husband contracting one of the nation's top surrogacy agencies, dated 1 week after he learned Mr. Moreno had a biological son?" The room went silent. Matthew went rigid. "Your Honor," the lawyer continued, Mr. Moreno has not been seeking a child. He has been seeking an heir. When it became clear his wife could not provide one, he turned to the son he had previously discarded as a loose end. He paused. This is not about love. It is about acquisition. Sophia stared at the documents, then at her husband, and something inside her broke. The years of emotional neglect, of being a pawn in his dynastic ambitions, all came to a head. "He told me," she said, her voice trembling but finding a new strength. "He told me the boy was a mistake. He told me Lucia wasn't fit. When he found out he was under Gabriel's protection, he became obsessed. He said he was the final piece in his collection, that he would own every image and everything Gabriel ever wanted." She was done. The lie was exposed. Matthew's carefully constructed narrative of the repentant father lay in ruins, revealing the cold, grasping ambition underneath. The judge's ruling was swift and devastating, granting Lucia full custody and issuing a permanent restraining order against Matthew. His visitation rights were suspended indefinitely. He had lost. Walking out of the courthouse, blinking in the sudden sunlight, Lucia saw Matthew standing by his car. He looked diminished, his power stripped away, leaving only a hollow shell of a man. Their eyes met for a moment, and she felt nothing. No hatred, no anger, not even pity. He was simply a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer hers. Gabriel placed a protective arm around her shoulder, and they walked away, leaving Matthew with the ruin of his own making, the true legacy. Later that night, back at the Finca Vance, they tucked Matthias into bed. "Papa," Matthias murmured drowsily, "did you win your big meeting today?" Gabriel smoothed the hair back from Matthias's forehead. "Yes, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We won." He and Lucia stood in the hallway for a moment, the quiet peace of the home settling around them. She reached out and took his hand. It was not a gesture of romance, but of something deeper, a partnership, a gratitude, and a shared, unbreakable bond. They had faced the storm together and emerged into the calm. They were a family, not of blood, but of choice. And in the quiet fortress of Finca Vance, they were finally, truly home. And so, the empire built on lies crumbled, and the family built on love stood stronger than ever. Matthew Moreno learned the hardest lesson of all, that a child is not a possession to be reclaimed, and that a family cannot be acquired through a hostile takeover. Lucia, Gabriel, and Matthias proved that the truest bonds are forged not by blood, but by choice, by sacrifice, and by showing up every day. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of the cruelest betrayal, new beginnings are possible. And sometimes, the greatest protector comes from the most unexpected place. Thank you for listening. What did you think of the end of this story? Let us know in the comments. And if this story of resilience and unexpected love moved you, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who loves a story of justice. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat.